Welcome back to another video. In this particular video, I'm going to show you how you can use the shape methodology that we've talked about in previous videos to actually create a character. So in this particular case, I'm looking at a photo reference of a girl that's doing a kung fu sidekick, and I'm blocking out the shapes based on looking at that photo reference using the freeform lasso tool in Photoshop. So you can see here that I've got her shape blocked in. I'm going to drop the opacity here, and then I'll do my first pass, which is a rough pencil sketch. I'm using the True Grit Texture Supply brushes for creating this particular piece, and I'm finding volume in this flat shape to give it some dimension. And you'll see that as I work through this particular image, I'm just getting my bearings with it, and things will change, like the hands. I'll just put some placeholders in there for now. I try not to focus too much on detail at this first pass. And we're drawing the feet. It's always important to work from references. It's a good practice, especially if you're new to drawing. And you can always change the reference to match your characters. This is just a quick study to show the technique of starting with shapes. So now I'm going to switch to a new layer after making my pencil layer transparent, and I'm going to go in with a little bit more of a more detailed pass. And again, this is all real time. Didn't speed up the video or anything. You're kind of seeing how I work through this sketch. So I have the reference on a second monitor. And this is what I mean by changing up the hand positions. And I'm looking at the folds and the bends on the uniform. And again, that's where references can be very, very helpful. And it's important to use the reference as a guide and not be a slave to the reference. You can change things around from the reference. You don't have to be, making an exact copy. And in my specific example, I modified the hand positions to kind of match what I was going for. Belt. To move through a composition without having to zoom in and zoom out, you can hold the space bar, and that allows you to then use your mouse or your stylus to move around within your composition. It's a lot faster than having to zoom in and zoom out. Toes in. Then I was not really feeling the collar around the foot, so I redrew that just to kind of give it a little bit more life and movement to make it look more dimensional. When you're drawing natural objects, characters and stuff, it's important to think about tapering. The ponytail is tapered, goes from thin to thick to thin. Now blocking in areas of dark values hiding the initial underdrawing. And I'm just filling in values as needed. Because this is a relatively quick sketch, it's not a tightened drawing by any means. It's, you know, tighter than what I started out with, but it's not a fully overly rendered image. It's just a very, I would still consider this to be a loose sketch. But the crux of what I'm trying to show in this video is how you can use the lasso tool to help you block out your character's pose without having to worry about all the nitty-gritty details when you're starting out. It's a great tool for ideation. In my previous video, I used the shape technique to develop a series of unique head shapes. So here I'm coloring the belt, just shading it in. Adding some shadows, adding some definition to her torso. And now what I'll do is I'll convert that quickly to black using the hue saturation slider. If you adjust the brightness all the way to the left, you can take your rough drawing and then you can make it, you know, dark. So I'm going to use the magic wand trick where I select outside of the object and then inverse the selection to fill in. You can see that I've got a gap. So I'm going to go back in with the freeform lasso tool to manually select the gi, or the top part of the uniform. And I find this method very quick to work with because it allows me to then use the hue saturation tool to quickly dial in the right color. I'm not going back and forth between the color swatches too much. I do that on occasion, but I'm not going to it for every single color. I find this just to be a faster way to work. Plus, it also gives me, you know, a chance of getting more harmonious colors as opposed to picking colors arbitrarily that may or may not work for the composition. And so I'm using the magic wand tool and selecting the base color layer, hitting Command G or J, sorry, or Control J to jump the selection onto its own layer. And I'm filling in the hand. This is I'm using the eyedropper tool for that. I want to pick values that make sense. Let's use the lasso tool for coloring in the lips. I want to make sure that that's on the topmost layer underneath my inks. As I work, I'm not really labeling my layers. I know that some people are very particular about that as they work, but that takes me too much away from the flow of actually drawing. So the only time I will actually label layers is if I'm turning in work for a client that needs a layered PSD file, and that's very rare. Normally I will give a flattened PSD file if a client requests the PSD. So here I'm adding some white highlights. And I'm doing quick fill-ins with the Alt backspace or Alt delete or Option delete on a Mac. It's the fastest way to fill in your foreground colors. In my opinion, it's a must memorize keyboard shortcut if you're doing any kind of digital drawing within Photoshop. So now I'm going to use the lasso tool to define some areas of shadow. Duplicate the layer, duplicate the selection, and dial in a darker shade of red. I'll do the same thing for the torso area. I'm just going to sample that value. Same thing underneath her palm. I'm always going back to the base color layer that has my color flats and using that to select the dark areas. I'm not going to really add any highlights on this one. Just some shadows. Just to demonstrate how I'm using these techniques primarily. And so now I'll just take all those layers. I'm looking around to seeing if there's anything I might have missed. Fill in the ear a little bit with some dark values and also a section that's behind her head, just to make the earrings pop. Now what I'll do is I'll go underneath that layer, put in a background color. Fill it in. Let's add a stroke around that just to make that background pop. And I'll thicken it up. We're almost done with this. I just want to go ahead and show the initial silhouette that I started out with. So I'll scale that down and just move it up to the appropriate layer. So I hope you found this video to be informative. Let me know. If you like the video, drop me a comment. And as always, I thank you for watching.